Welcome back to the Manor. Julian McBain here, and this is my 46th Saturday vlog. As you can tell, I've been hunting. And the reason I come in the middle of the hunt is because I ended up stopping. I got a false start. I had a false start. It was less than 60 seconds, but I wasn't going to retreat all the way back just to have a pristine start. So, here we are. And now that Mayhem's over, we're back to our regularly scheduled program. So, anyway. It is the nature of humans to organize themselves around ideas. We have an innate need to build our world around us based on ideas that have built themselves into our mind. And there's any number of metaphors for this. In Christianity, it was the Bible. In Islam, it's the Quran. But just from a constructive standpoint, any set of ideas, when put together, can create a set of values that creates the structure for the environment we find ourselves in. For lack of a better term, from a metaphysical perspective. Now, this is the way we mentally structure our world. And when things don't fit that worldview, when things don't fit within that structure, it feels like it's incorrect. And so we normally correct by either omitting it or rejecting it, or feeling pain because it is, if it's inevitable, if it's the unstoppable force running into our immovable object, but our immovable object is immovable but not unbreakable, then we experience some internal strife and we experience internal pain. And so I've been thinking about, when you have that architecture you've built, and when that architecture is being challenged, how do you handle that challenge to the fundamental architecture of your being? And that's not an easy question to answer, because you're talking about challenging beliefs, and beliefs are hard things to change, man. It's not meant to be easy, and it's not easy. It shouldn't be easy. Because if you could change your beliefs at the drop of the hat, well, hell, what's the purpose of having them? And I mean, yes, the ability to change things based upon evidence is an important thing to be able to do, but it's not that simple. The fundamental truths that we build within ourselves, even when proven to be false, are still internal truths that we have to gradually change. And so that's something that I think that we as humans have to really look at ourselves when we're building these architectures, but at the same time when that architecture is challenged, when there's a piece of the architecture that we think fits correctly, but maybe we're not seeing the whole picture. We don't see a brick from all sides at once. We can't see all sides of a pillar, or the top or the bottom. So for all we know, the brick could be nice and smooth and flush on the side that we can see, but if you go around to the back, it's like sticking out an extra 6 inches because it's the wrong size. We might have to hew that brick down some, or it might need some polish. And so, but we don't like changing things, because by changing a piece of that architecture, we run the risk of damaging the architecture as a whole. So even if the piece itself does not fit correctly, or if it's instantiated on an incorrect framing, as in, on my side the brick is smooth and flush, but on the other side the brick sticks out 6 inches and it's creating all kinds of problems for, I don't know, the way water drains off the roof or something like that. It's one of those things that, and we fear if we chip away at the brick on the outside, we may crack the brick, like all the way through. And if that happens, you have to remove the brick, and God only knows if you'll have to find another one to fit in its place let alone the size that you actually needed in the first place. It's just as if you're taking the devil that you know rather than the devil you don't, even though the devil you don't know may not be the devil. And I'm getting really into religious metaphor. Can you tell I've been listening to a lot of Jordan Peterson? But it's an easy allegory to make because the entire purpose of it was to kind of create this architecture. So anyway, you run into that issue, and you run into the issue that you don't necessarily know whether or not what you believe is true is actually correct. Or on the opposite side, you cling to it so hard it becomes pathological. And that's when tempers flare, and that's when people become intractable. And when you're intractable, it means that no matter what evidence is presented to the contrary, you will not allow your beliefs to be altered. And so when you're the person who becomes intractable, how do you change that? And that's a hard question to answer. Because in some cases you should be intractable. When there is something that is so important that your very survival is based upon holding on to that belief, it's really important that you are able to do so. But flexibility at the same time is desperately important as well, because under no circumstances should any belief be held so tightly that it becomes pathological to believe it. There's always the possibility that you're wrong. And this is true in science. I mean, this is a scientific truth, because that's how all scientific theories are presented. You know, you have your theory, and you have the hypothesis, and let's say the hypothesis is the sky is blue. Okay? And the null hypothesis is that it's not blue. And so you conduct experiments and you try to figure out, and the more experiments you conduct, you realize that yes, in fact, the sky is blue. And then you say, okay, we have proven that theory to be as correct as it possibly can be from a constructive standpoint. We observe the sky to be blue. The light, we've conducted an experiment, and sure enough, the waves of light coming down through the sky are in fact blue. Reflected back from the sky are in fact blue. This is why the sky is blue. And then someone comes along and says, well, no, it's not because it's reflecting the blue back. It's because of Rayleigh scattering. And so that throws the whole hypothesis up in the air. And I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on Rayleigh scattering, but that's if you look it up, that is actually what makes the sky blue. And so, you know, when I was a kid, the fundamental truth was the sky is blue because of refraction. And then as an adult, I discovered it's because of Rayleigh scattering. And so I had to change that internal truth because I was presented with evidence. Now, that seems like a really silly thing to get hung up on, but there are people out there that would get hung up on the sky being blue. And no matter what you tell them, they are going to be intractable about it. And now, usually it's about much more personal things than that. But that was an easy and, frankly, non-controversial example. And so you have to be willing to defend your beliefs, and you have to be willing to defend them with as much honesty and vigor as you can possibly muster. But you also have to be willing to know when you're wrong. Because if you're wrong and you demand to hold on to that belief, then you're never going to grow. You can't live without flexibility. And that doesn't mean you're going to bend over backwards for everyone else. That's a stupid idea. Because there are plenty of people with wrong, stupid ideas, and they'll present logical evidence as to why their idea is correct. And it may not be as good as your evidence. It might be better than your evidence. But just letting go of the idea willy-nilly is not a smart idea. You have to, can you experiment with the idea, preferably in a controlled environment, but that's not always possible, in a way for you to determine which idea by evidence is the better one. And sometimes that's not possible. Sometimes you have to make a snap decision, or sometimes you have to come to a compromise. You can't always do things scientifically, which is unfortunate, because if you could do everything scientifically, that would probably solve like 90% of the problems between people in the world. We often say that people with strong ideas about something have strong personalities. And I don't know if that's the right way to say it, although it's the colloquialism. It's how we say it. They have a strong personality, especially regarding this item. And maybe we should just say that they have strong opinions. And so when you're running into someone with a strong opinion about something, you have to... I don't like the phrase walking on eggshells, because that's what it feels like, but that's not what you should be doing. Figuring out how to diplomatically handle the situation in a way that you can get your point across, even if they don't accept it, but in a way that at least makes them think and consider. And it might be that after thinking and considering, they reject the notion altogether. That's their prerogative to do in a lot of cases. But at the same time, the important thing is that at the same time, they need to put themselves in a position to think about the situation as objectively as possible. And I say as objectively as possible because in a lot of cases, straight up objectively isn't possible. Because that is the nature of our subjective experience. But if they can try to remove themselves from their own mental situation as much as they can, and that takes practice. That's hard. It takes lots of practice. But if they can try to prise themselves out of the state of their opinion and just say, okay, if I wasn't me and I was observing this from the outside, how would I view this situation? If more people could do that, because that's a skill. That is a skill, and it is damn hard to develop. Not many people have it, and most of the people that do, frankly, work in the sciences because engineers do it, scientists do it, doctors are especially good at it because medicine is as much an art as it is a science, at least as far as I can tell. I know that a lot of the softer sciences like psychology and sociology are definitely as much art as they are science. And I would be willing to bet you could ask any professional in those two fields, and they would probably say the same thing. Yes, there's a lot of empirical things, but there's a lot of variation across the distribution. And so figuring out where on that distribution a person lies is as much an art as it is a science, because you can't just hook them up to a machine and have it spit out numbers. That's why we come up with batteries and why we come up with personality tests and why there are literally thousands of tests to be conducted so you can figure out the individual pieces of a person's personality. And so what if you're a person that's on the other side of things? You're not the strong personality, but you have to handle the strong not handle. I don't like the word handle. You have to work with people who have strong personalities. It's essentially that's another one of those things that's both as much an art as it is a science. And frankly speaking, it's a challenge that I have yet to figure out very well. I have been put in positions where I can do it, but unfortunately, I'm I fall into the trap of either being too weak or too strong. Because if you come on too strong, you're going to push that other person away. And if you come on too weak, they're going to roll over you. And so finding the right level of assertiveness that will open up their mind just enough to at least listen to what you have to say. So they have to reflect, they have to review their own beliefs and come up with a stable counter argument. And even if they push back, they might see that a piece of the framework they have built is incorrect. And it might be that they say, well, I see this isn't great, but I don't know the way to fix it. But I think your way to fix it is incorrect. You still made the point. You've gotten them that step. And this doesn't mean they're going to agree with you, but it still broadens their horizons. And so at that point, someone who might say, no, I'm not going to listen to any counter argument at all, might say, you make a good point, but I still disagree. See, now you're playing on a much more level playing field, and it seems like a small thing. But if they can at least admit to the fact that you have a good point, if you have a good point to begin with, because that's a major deal. You've got to have a good point to begin with. You've got to have some sort of strong ground to stand on when you're challenging these beliefs, or they are going to tear you apart, and rightly so. You know, don't go arbitrarily breaking into the personal architecture of another person without having a firm foundation for having to need to. I mean, unless you're that person's psychologist, and if you're that person's psychologist, or if you're a psychologist at all and you're listening to me, holy crap, thanks a lot. But it's important that when you go into this, you understand your own limitations. And you understand what you're going to be facing. And it's going to come as a surprise at first. So the first time you are probably going to fail hard because you're not going to be expecting it. Because it's going to hit you like a brick wall. And then you're going to be like, whoa, what just happened? What did I do? And then you're going to find out it was an issue. And you're going to go, okay, unfortunately, I still need to push the point. So how do I do so in a way that does the least amount of fundamental harm, but can still make it so they understand the way I'm viewing things? I mean, unless there is an emergency need, like the person's insisting that they're okay, but you can tell that they're bleeding, their shoulder's bleeding profusely. That's a totally different situation. At that point, you're like, no, we're calling an ambulance, let's go. But from an ideas perspective, not from a harm perspective, it's like the rule that it's like Peterson's rule, clean up your own room before you criticize the world. So make sure your own point is as organized and as well created as possible before you outright challenge the way someone's house is built. Because what you see as a fault might also just be a difference in architecture. A person who thinks that Art Deco is the perfect type of architecture will look at Art Nouveau and say, this feels wrong. And a person who has Art Nouveau looks at Art Deco and they say, this feels wrong. But it's not that they're wrong. It's that they're different perspectives, and it's right for the person who has it for their own house. And so this is the challenge. This is the challenge that we face in interpersonal relationships. As someone who has long been... No, I can't even say that. As someone who is only now learning just how in-depth the human psyche is, right? So, like, in college, I took Intro to Psychology and I took Abnormal Psychology. So I took a freshman level psychology, And I took a junior level psychology with nothing in between. So I saw the most basic and the most complex cases with none of the intermediary. And that is a gap that I should fill just so I have a better understanding of how the mind works. But it is predicated on a desire for us to fit in with our own peers. At the same time, we are able to hold in our own beliefs that we fall into the trap of believing that we have to either fall in line or we're outcast, or we have to convince other people. And sometimes you have to, because that's how interpersonal relationships are created. You know, you all agree that if you're going to play together, you have to play by a certain set of rules. And that's the architecture of, let's say if you build your own house around your own personal beliefs, you build the neighborhood around a compromise between the beliefs of your home and the beliefs of every other house in your network, and that's your neighborhood. And your close friends are your neighbors, and then the next layer out is maybe that's the village or the town. And then the next wider one would be akin to the county, and you just keep building outwards, or the township, depending on where you are. And you just keep building outwards as your network broadens and your connections are less important to you, even though they might be because their neighborhoods are going to be condensed around them, and those neighborhoods are connected and intertwined into broader networks, because that's how humans work, because we're very social creatures. And so being able to compromise on the broader scale within your neighborhood, okay, it's like, okay, when we're in the neighborhood level, we're going to play by, or when in my house, we play by this set of rules because these are the things that I hold dear. And then you broaden out and you're like, well, this is my circle of friends and we're in a neighborhood. And so when we're operating in the neighborhood, we set file by this set of rules that is a stable compromise between the belief systems and rules of all of the other houses in this neighborhood. And then you move out and it's like, okay, well, now we're in a broader group, a club or a society or a guild, and where you go, okay, so in this guild we've got multiple groups of friends, so multiple neighborhoods, and while we're operating as a guild, we have this broader set of rules with some flexibility in them that we all agree to play by. You know, these are the immutable things that we have to absolutely have to follow in order for this group to fundamentally work. And every layer you move out, those rules will get broader and broader and more vague. By necessity, because you're operating with there will be a lot more disparate sets of rules operating under a bigger and bigger auspice. And sometimes in order to make that work, you have to subdivide that into subgroups that almost add barriers between different things, but at the same time it operates in a way to make it so that the group as a whole, the larger group as a whole, can play together in a functional manner. And so this is a very challenging thing to really kind of come up against, and this is something that only recently am I really grasping just how complicated it can be to make all these disparate pieces come together and function. And it's been a challenge, and it's not a bad thing. You know, we need challenges. We absolutely need challenges, because without challenges, we're not growing. And I'm finding, even in the short term, the amount of growth that I'm experiencing because of this is substantial. And so, and there's plenty more to go. And so the question remains is, you know, how do you reconcile all these factors? Well, that's a good question, and sometimes you can't, but sometimes you have to. And that's where the challenge lies. You got to figure it out. You know, sometimes it's like, well, okay, so I'm dealing with all of these disparate pieces, and none of these pieces want to play together, but we've got to get them all on the same board in order to make this work. And there might come a time when people decide, well, you know, I don't want to play by the rules, so I'm going to leave the game. And you got to let them do it. and maybe they want to start their own game over there, and that's their, that's what they have to do. But at the same time, sometimes the number of pieces you have is necessary in order for everyone to play the game and still have the game operate in a functional manner. And so striking that balance is very, very important. And figuring out what each individual person's non-negotiables are and how to operate within the bounds of trying to make sure you can mitigate the circumstances where the non-negotiable becomes a problem. And if the non-negotiable is the game itself, then you've got a challenge. You've got a major challenge to overcome. And that's one that I don't know how to solve. Because at that point it's you know what, we're gonna sleep near out after I kill this guy. Because at that point there's absolutely no way to reconcile any of it. Oh yeah, it's the quad wing that doesn't have any fuel. Or it has fuel, but it's running out. So there is my, that's what's been on my mind lately. And I'd be interested to hear your input. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Please like, share, and subscribe down below. We are on the road to 13 million subscribers, one subscription at a time, so make sure you subscribe. Guys, I really appreciate all your support, especially if you've made it this far with me. Wow. I needed this. Going 2 weeks without a vlog, you run out of vlog posts, and you're like, I don't know what to talk about, and then you go 2 or 3 weeks without doing it, and it's like, holy crap, my mind is full again. Alright, guys. Thank you so much. You all have a wonderful night.